hard stop at 3, so I want to ensure that we give everyone time for the meeting. Why don't we just, I'm Charlie Zelli, Chair of the CMC, but also Chair of the Metro Council. And why don't we go around the room, introduce ourselves, both members and alternates. Going to my left, Riva.
Hi, my name is Riva Chambliss. I'm Vice Chair of the Metropolitan Council representing District 2.
Hi, my name is Carla Redondo, representative with Blue Line Coalition and Director of Pueblos de Lucha y Esperanza.
Jeff Lenny, Hennepin County Commissioner, representing District 1.
Bill Blonigan, Robbinsdale Mayor, the entire city.
Jillian Rosenquist, City Council Member for the City of Golden Valley, entire city.
Jeremiah Ellison, City Council Member in Minneapolis, Ward 5.
Suzanne Zabatka, I'm Senior Policy Aide to Mayor Fry, City of Minneapolis.
I'm Sarah Gondor, and I'm filling in for Mike Barnes from MnDOT Metro District.
Meg Forney, President of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board.
Hi, I'm Therese Kaiser. I represent Ward 1 in Crystal.
Chris Beckwith, Blue Line Project Office.
John Pacheco, District 6 and Council Member.
Nick Thompson, representing Metro Transit.
Dr. Tara Watson, BAC Board Chair, Co-Chair.
Dan Dorr, co-chair as well, BAC.
Aaron Wagner, I'm on the Robbinsdale City Council.
Irene Fernando, Hennepin County Board.
Well, thank you all, and welcome visitors. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders. This meeting is live streamed and recorded by Met Council. If you have any interest in any of the handouts or today's presentations, they are posted on the project website, bluelineext.org. And members of the public who are watching, feel free to give some comments to Nikongo Sigulu until Friday, June 16th. They will be posted as well, and Nikongo's email is on the website. It's actually also on slide 2. We'll get to when we're doing the presentation. And just so everybody knows, these mics are live, so be thoughtful of that as well. So today, we're going to get a project update, but maybe more importantly, we're going to have an opportunity to talk more here at the table about the community-driven anti-displacement work that we reviewed at the last meeting, but really ran out of time to have a more robust conversation. And also, this is Minneapolis Day. We're going to discuss some options, some design options when we go through, when we consider that alignment. So in addition to this business today, I know we're going to have an opportunity for the public to give some public testimony. I want to just mention before we even start that this is the first meeting we've had after the end of the legislative session. That was a very big legislative session for transportation and for the state of Minnesota in so many different ways. And I won't go into all the details, but happy to say that for transit, both for Met Council, for counties, for even cities, there's really additional sustainable funding so we can actually achieve the vision that we have been describing and talking about. There is capital funds for arterial bus rapid transit and a number of initiatives to help promote safety, including a safety service intervention project, which has already begun. With that, I want to give an opportunity, this 15 minutes we've set aside for public testimony. And Chris, do we have a list of those that would like to present? I just will remind folks that we would like 3 minutes in order to get enough people to spend the time. So I don't have the list, so I'll give it. I'll give it up to you, Chris.
But Kathy Leeske is first.
Okay, welcome. There will be bells or buzzers or sirens when you reached your time, so.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Kathy Knightsky from Lynn Park. And I don't know why today I'm nervous. I'm going to use technology a little bit, but if it goes haywire, I'm probably the lowest toe on technology in the room, so I really should get credit for even trying. Here we go. But I can read notes too. I have a question or something I'd like you to consider is to do a benefit cost analysis. I don't know all the details being a resident and coming to meetings and reading as best I can, but I'd like to request that a benefit cost analysis be done to determine the economic benefits and disadvantages and advantages and benefits of these blue line plans that are put forward. By doing this, the cost analysis, we'd consider travel time and safety savings and the cost of the construction and the long-term increased operating costs. So I think there's a lot of benefit from doing and investing money into that. So let's find out, and let me add too, let's have a third party do that. The second thing, the technology piece, I don't know if any of you watched the local TPT channel, but they just broadcast the other night, and I was half asleep, but it caught my attention. It was called Interstate 94, A History and Its Impact. Did anyone see that? Was anyone at the festival besides? There was in the summer of 2015 a Rondo, I'm going to call it, because they called it different names, a Rondo Healing Festival. And they had invited people from the community to come and speak and be a part of that. It seemed like a very cool festival. And I have let's see, at that time, the commissioner of MnDOT was speaking, not in charge of the Interstate 94 work that got done, but just representing MnDOT as a healer, I presume. So the words to commit, well, here, let's get the audio going. And what do I have? 1 more minute to get the audio going? I can do it. I know I can. I'll start it again. Well, I think it's good.
Build that kind of atrocity. As the head of that same agency, I apologize. You know, I stand before you today to commit to a new era where we do put people ahead of highways and community ahead of cars. This freeway, the one.
Does anyone want me to replay that? Raise your hand and I will figure it out with my techie. Thank you so much. And I hope you remember and consider these things. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we have a Eva Young, or was that Eva?
Yeah, this
Oh, you, okay, great.
Eva Young. I live in Boardwalk City Homes in Lynn Park, pretty close to the Lyndale alignment of one of the proposed alignments of the light rail. And I just want to second what Kathy said about doing a cost-benefit analysis with, and really looking at some of these economic assumptions, because I think that things have, I think there's some claims that might not really come from data. And so that's kind of all I wanted to say, but, thanks for taking comments at these meetings, and I'm intending to watch the whole show, the 94 show later on today, but.
And I think that's the names we have for those that wanted to have a chance for a public comment, so I appreciate that. Not to respond to public comments, but I will just say on a really hot 93-degree day on a Friday afternoon at Rondo to not be scripted, but to come to a healing and reconciliation ceremony was probably one of the top 5 highlight moments of my life. To issue an apology on behalf of the Department of Transportation was it caused a start of considering what the nature of apologies really are and what actions you really have to take to back those up. And I think MnDOT has certainly changed and started a Reconnect Rondo kind of work. So I think that's something I feel was really important, and we should be taking those lessons seriously. On to the agenda and looking at the meeting summary from May 11th, and those are sent out in advance. If there are any edits or changes, please let us know. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, great, those minutes are approved. And I believe we will not have anyone from the CAC, but we do have someone from the BAC, and Dr. Watson and Dan, do you want to give us a little Business Advisory Committee?
I facilitated the most recent BAC discussion, and I would say that the general nature of the conversation or the reaction to most recent developments by the extension team, it was very similar to past months, encouraging the project team to continue to do a better job listening, to be more effective with communicating and more transparent. I'm going to offer my reaction to the nature of the conversation. I think communication and listening and transparency goes both ways. And at the last meeting, there was an opportunity for folks to offer reactions to the alternative routes that are going to be presented today and were presented to us a couple days early. And there wasn't a whole lot of communicating about how the alternatives are an improvement on the Lindale line or route. And I guess I just want to offer my challenge to all of us is to be really clear about why we're objecting to things or why we are critiquing things, and to be really transparent about, are we just generally opposed to the blue line? And then maybe we talk about things that were presented here about funding and is the whole project worth doing? My worry is we're going to have endless debate and objections about details, and we might not do what's best for Hennepin County or for our city. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments, additional? All right, let's thank you, Dan. Let's get to the project update. I know, Chris, you're gonna, and Nick, present both the update, and then we're gonna get into the design issues. We also kind of cover how that legislation maybe affects some blue line, there's some blue line specific language in that legislation. You might want to cover that as well. So, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm going to cover a first few slides on an update and then hand it over to Nick to talk about the Minneapolis design update. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the slides that you've already seen, but this is for the Blue Line LRT extension as shown on the map here. The overall timeline as shown on this slide right here is also the same as what you've seen in past months. So I'm going to keep going to get to some more important updates. The legislative update, as the chair mentioned. So there are 3 bulleted items here I want to cover today. The first one, the great news that the project was awarded $50 million for the Blue Line extension by the legislature. $10 million of that is available for design. $40 million of that will be available later on once we get the full funding grant agreement from the Federal Transit Administration. So that was good news for us. The next item I wanted to report on, and these are all paraphrased requirements that came out of the legislation. So the second bullet here is the community engagement meetings. And this is a requirement that we conduct quarterly meetings in consultation with community groups. Now, we are already conducting quite a bit of engagement, so this is right in line with what we are doing. Some of the changes here are that those meetings will be documented and then provided as attachments to your packet. So provided directly to the CMC. So that part will be a little bit different. You'll see some more summary materials from us. The representatives will include 4 entities that are listed there: Met Council, Hennepin County, MnDOT, and all corridor cities. So that's consistent with what we've been doing. Then the third item here, by July 1st, the project team must coordinate with community groups to establish a framework for these engagement meetings. Now, we have a draft document of the framework that we intend to publish on our website and distribute on Monday. So we'll send out a newsletter. We will contact those community groups that were named in that legislation, and then also reach out to any others that might have been missed. We want feedback on the framework. We would give you till June 30th. We're always open to feedback after that point too, but the legislation is requiring us to be done by July 1st. So watch for that information on Monday. And we look forward to, if there's any new ideas, we're happy to implement those. And then the last bullet on here, the BLRT route alignment consultation. The legislation requires evaluation of routes east of 94 in consultation with Minneapolis, in consultation with Met Council, Hennepin County, MnDOT in Minneapolis. And Nick will cover a sub-option that we're proposing to add for study. The last item here, all cities. So everyone around this table has the opportunity to present at any time concerns and proposals to the CMC. You all know we've been going through city by city this year, but if there's additional information you wish to bring forward to this group, the legislation is trying to make sure that you know you have an opportunity to do that. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the legislation is and what our next steps are in the project office. I will keep moving. I wanted to highlight our engagement principles that are not new, but the legislation I just referred to is really in line with our engagement principles. A couple things for me to point out. The second one, tailor engagement practices to meet the needs of the individual communities. We want to hear from the communities. If there's something we can do different, if there's different groups that we aren't reaching, let us know. And then we want to use the community goals, priorities, and criteria to inform that decision making and adjust our strategies. So really everything in the legislation is right in line with what our goals are as well. The last slide I will present to you before handing it to Nick is just an updated timeline for the Corridor Management Committee. As I mentioned, we've been going through city by city, February, March, April. Last month we talked about anti-displacement. We're excited to continue that conversation today and also introduce an option in Minneapolis. Next month we will revisit Minneapolis again with hopefully some additional technical recommendations and discussion. And then in August, if we're ready, we will go kind of end to end and review everything we've talked about this year and kind of bundle that up in August if this group is ready to have that discussion. That's the end of my slides. Are there any questions for me?
Go ahead, Ricardo.
Thank you. Thank you for your information. I'm just curious. We did notice on the bill that funded the project that anti-displacement made an appearance as an activity or as a concept, and I was just curious to just wonder why it didn't make it to the final list or to the slide. And then you also mentioned community groups that will be contacted to set up engagement meetings. Could you maybe let us know, like, who are those community groups that you're looking to be working with?
Yes. Mr. Chair, can you elaborate on your first question about the anti-displacement?
By looking at the way the bill is at the end of the session, it appeared that anti-displacement was the topic that would to be discussed during these engagement meetings, or so it appeared to us that way. So I'm just wondering if there's an idea on the kind of topics that will be covered through these engagement efforts with these community groups, or what kind of conversations will be held. Is it like a debriefing, like a CMC meeting, like just trying to understand what these engagement meetings will be about, I guess, maybe, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chair and committee members, So the framework that we will publish on Monday will include those details. We will make sure that anti-displacement is listed as a topic that we will cover. Obviously, that's very important and something we always highlight at those meetings. So you will see the more finer details on the outreach on Monday, and then have an option or opportunity to give us feedback and make sure we're not missing anything. As far as the community groups that were named, I don't have the legislation in front of me, but we can look that up and report before the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a question? Oh, go ahead, Meg. Sorry.
Thank you. Is the Minneapolis Park Board involved in your community engagement? You said other cities. I wasn't sure if the Park Board was going to be.
Mr. Chair, trying to think if we've had Park Board representation at our meetings. We certainly in our issue resolution team process.
Consideration.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? All right, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. So I'd like to start off first here, and I'll just have them stand up as I announce them. But we are building up staff with the project now as we're starting to roll, and Boyan has actually been with us for about 3 months, but we wanted to get the opportunity to introduce him. So Boyan Missick, he's with Hennepin County, but he's the civil engineering lead for the project. So I'm really happy that he's on board to help me with a lot of the engineering and design workloads. So Boyan is not a stranger to transit projects. So you see Boyan back there. And then Kaja Vang also has joined our team in the last few months. Kaja is a community outreach coordinator and has experience working with Three Rivers Park District and some other political positions in here. So we're really happy to have Kaja here to represent and help us out, focusing in the North Minneapolis area. So I will not go through this slide in detail out of respect for time, but we bring this back for every one of the cities because this is the design principles. This is what we base our design off of, and the decisions and options and our discussions as we're moving forward. Just all these principles here to help guide us and make sure that we're consistent with what we're doing and we're touching on everything. So as Chris had mentioned, this is the beginning of the Minneapolis discussion, and you know, Minneapolis, we've had a lot of work to go through. We have some more different options in Minneapolis than we have in our other communities. So this is probably going to take more than one shot at it. We know it will, but want to just begin this conversation. So Minneapolis options in our discussion here really were how do we get from Target Field Station to the Broadway alignment? So that's where the options come into place. The route from does it go to 21st Avenue or to West Broadway? When we get up there, do we have a West Broadway route or do we have transit on a portion of 21st? And then in that area also, do we consider one station or two stations with the West Broadway or a 21st option? And then as in all our communities, station refinement as we start looking at the stations that are located and proposed in each one of the communities and along the alignment. We'll refine that as we move forward for access and accessibility and convenience and ridership. But one of the key things that we want to start off with here is the West Broadway or 21st option, how we get from Target Field Station. So last October, we presented a route recommendation, and at that time, we had Lindale Avenue as a connection to get us from Target Field Station to either West Broadway or 21st. And from community input and from the recommendation of this group, we were asked to take a look at an option that was east of 94 as an option along there. So that gets us from Olson Memorial Highway, from Target Field Station up 7th Street, and either looking at Lindale Avenue or focusing on that east of 94. So both routes, again, have that opportunity to connect to West Broadway or to 21st Avenue. And it's important to point out, any of the options that we have here, we do need to cross 94 at some point with it. So, how do we make those crossings? So I want to talk a little bit more in depth about that east of I-94 option. So this is some key points there that as we've worked with the Minneapolis staff and we've talked with the community and looked through the options and even meetings with our partners over at MnDOT. One of the things that we look at here is that a route north of 10th. So on this route, we come down 7th Street and we turn on 10th, and 10th kind of goes between our bus garages here. So it goes through the Metro Transit campus. And as we come off of 10th and start moving north in this option on that pink line, one of the things we note is that on the 3rd, 4th viaducts that come on and off of 94 area, with the tight constraint in there, that we know we have to move a good portion of that 3rd Street ramp. So just listing out some of the issues or concerns that we have looking at that option. Also, it's a narrow corridor in the area behind the area where Twin Cities International School is, or in between that 3rd Street ramp and the parking lot and playgrounds that International School has. Also, as you see in number 3, where that oval is, a blue spot, that's where we've indicated or a proposed station location just on the north side of Plymouth. There are existing commercial property buildings there, and even trying to fit in tight along 94 with the station in that area, we know that we'll have likely significant impacts to some of the existing commercial properties in that area north of Plymouth. And then due to the challenges in number 4 of crossing over 94, we've proposed and looked at quite a few different options. We're trying to look at, at grade options and how they'll function, but we had proposed as we left that station to cross 17th Avenue, which is actually an off-ramp from I-94, getting onto Washington and getting to West Broadway area. And we proposed a structure in that area that would get over the intersections there to get over an intersection if we were going to 21st of West Broadway, and then have to come across 94 also. So with those discussions and concerns with some of the challenges, we've trying to explore some what we call sub-options in this area. And that sub-option is shown in the green area where we continue from the pink line along 10th, and that takes us all the way to Washington Avenue. And then Washington Avenue, we can continue street running along there. So we're calling this a sub-option. It really, is a change for about 6 blocks of what that pink option on along the east side of 94 does. So one of the opportunities here, the Plymouth Avenue station, where it kind of backs up against 94, has maybe a little bit more challenging of a service area for folks to access in that location, and it's backed into the freeway in that location. So a station on Washington Avenue maybe better serves the community, that north part of the North Loop, a little bit better access and maybe a little bit more activated, at least in the existing conditions. One of the other options here is it does use the existing infrastructure, so we can stay on 10th Street and get to Washington and use that as a good connection. One of the key things here too is it helps to keep LRT at grade in all the crossings. So when we can operate within traffic and at grade, it really is the most efficient operation that we can have and the best way to access it. Now, the challenge here, and especially where you see the yellow arrow pointing up, that section of 10th Avenue is very narrow and has zero setbacks for a few blocks with some substantial apartment complexes in that area. So our challenges here as we look at this option, and we just want to make sure that we're rolling this out and explaining it to this committee to get a head nod to continue looking at this. But we have challenges with all the uses in that area. Vehicle traffic, it has heavy truck traffic in there. It's one of the main connections to get underneath the viaducts. Peds and bikes are in this area. There is parking on either side of the roadway. And obviously with our campus here and our 2 bus garages here, it's a major route to get transit buses in and out, substantial amount of buses in and out of here. So those are the challenges that we are looking with the green alignment, but we wanted to propose this to this committee so they could be open and get any comments on exploring this sub-option. So, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions or.
Any questions at this point, Reva?
Yeah, so the green option, which is further east of 94, where you have that narrowing on, I believe it's 10th Street, what are the options or alternatives for that area that are being proposed or considered?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, some of the things that we're exploring, and we want to work with our city partners here to make sure that we're getting input on that. But we do run in similar operations here in St. Paul, where we have roadway on either side. But knowing the volume of traffic here, are there other ways to handle that roadway traffic? So can we look for options for that? Is it a lot of options? Is it maybe a transit way that handles the bus traffic through there, the emergency vehicles? I forgot to mention there is a fire station in this area that needs to get through too. So emergency vehicles and maybe peds and bikes in transit and take the vehicular traffic to a different direction. So those are just a couple of the things that we would be exploring, and we are looking to find some creative ideas to really make it a good option.
Commissioner Fernando.
Yes, and I certainly want to make sure that Councilmember and Mayor can speak at length to this. I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly, though. So if this is on existing infrastructure, the other one, the pink option was that video with the bridge, right? And so this would eliminate that aspect. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fernando, yes, most of the pink, or a lot of the pink alignment, just south of 17th, going all the way down to where we make the turnoff at 10th, would have been new infrastructure. We're having to move roadways over, go through kind of the side slope along the interstate in that area. So that's where we say newer infrastructure. So even though we may be at grade there, we're building it on a structure. There's probably retaining walls involved.
That's just a big shift. So I just wanted to connect that, I don't know how many miles of that previous kind of video infrastructure was, but compared to at grade, that's a big distinction. And then want to, thank city partners. I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion, and as you all proceed with that conversation, certainly want to ensure that, that all council members are able, especially with this particular area. And so, yeah, thank you. And I think it's a big deal to go from that big infrastructure to at grade. So I'm grateful that that option exists. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Other comments, questions? Mayor Fry, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. Thanks for all the work. We appreciate the willingness to put forward some additional options or an additional option. This is one option that we've seen before. There were a couple of concerns that were highlighted by city staff previously, notably access to the fire station as well as bike and ped access. What, if anything, has been done to alleviate some of those concerns to ensure that fire trucks can get out properly and that there's full access along the way?
Mr. Chair, Mayor, this is an ongoing discussion that we are having with city staff, particularly in this area. But those are key things that we want to evaluate. If it would be a transit way that we would provide access to fire and safety, that connection through there, a transit way obviously helps with buses and with buses and bikes and peds. The vehicular traffic may be more of the challenge of how we get that and make sure we keep those good connections going.
So is the fire truck concern alleviated at this point from their standpoint? I actually haven't talked to them about this particular issue directly. I just wanted to check in.
Mr. Chair, Mayor, we still have to have conversations with the fire officials.
And it is highly possible that those concerns are alleviated, and when you talk with the firefighters, they tell you that we're all good, but there's also a chance that there are still problems. Going forward then, the question would be how are we evaluating future options that will be brought forward, because we could perhaps nip some of these issues in the bud right away. before the option is brought forward by, consulting with some of our city staff, just to make sure the proposal is viable. So I guess how are options being brought forward in the future? How do we explore these options and put them forward to the whole group? And how is that evaluated?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, we work closely with the city staff, before we pull out any, roll out any new designs or options. We want to make sure that we're at least having that conversation with city staff, that we're getting input from that and vetting it through. So this option is very conceptual at this point right now, but we think there's a viable option here to us, but we will work closely with city staff on the viability and the effectiveness of it. So, and we do meet with city staff on a regular weekly basis. So.
Dan, you have something to say.
Thanks, Mayor. I think one of the things, Dan Soler from Adjourn County, sometimes I cannot help myself from speaking, as the commissioner knows well. One of the things, Mayor, I think that's key is to really, before you start to lay down what any options look like, is to kind of look at, okay, what's happening on that road today? People are parking there, fire trucks go through, buses go through, vehicles go through, access to driveways, pedestrians, bikes, all of those modes. It's a little bit like what we did at the University of Minnesota when we built LRT through campus, is we said, okay, based on all those things, what can we get? If we can't have it all, what are the priorities? What do we want to get? So obviously, emergency vehicles, right? Every option we design has got to be able to get a fire truck through there. That's that's a basics. Pedestrians, right? There's access. We got to have options that have adequate sidewalks that get pedestrians. So once you start to lay those modal hierarchies out, then I think we start to lay down, okay, now then, what stays and what goes, and what goes needs to be accommodated some other way. So again, going back to our experience at the university, access to various different areas at the university that used to be from Washington Avenue, we found different ways to get people there, and therefore we addressed those. So that same kind of thing is how we'll attack this piece of 10th Avenue, is look at what's there today, what's going on today, knowing some of our basics are, we don't want to buy buildings. We want to build through that corridor. We want to supply a transportation corridor through there. What stays and what goes, and how do we solve all those pieces?
Thank you.
Great questions. Chris?
And Mr. Chair, I wanted to add that we have to do outreach now on this new sub-option. That is our highest priority. We wanted to introduce this to the CMC and then get busy on our outreach on this. And I also have the answer to Ricardo's question on which neighborhoods were named in the legislation. I'll just read that quick. Focused on Minneapolis neighborhoods, including Lynn Park, Willard Hay, Near North, and Jordan communities. And then the cities that were named in here are the 4 cities on the alignment. Representatives of the cities of Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park must attend meetings that occur in their respective cities, attend all meetings related to anti-displacement initiatives, and attend other project-related meetings as requested. So anti-displacement is also referenced in this.
Good. Councilmember.
Thank you. Jeremiah Ellison here. I don't know why I'm like losing my voice all of a sudden. I appreciate all the work that's been done here. You guys have heard a lot from Lynn Park. You've heard a lot from Northside residents about wanting to see, some changes on this route, on this alignment. I'm excited to see how things go. I think the lesson on this project is the second you start thinking you found a solution, you've really just finding a lot more other problems. And so we've got to, before I'm like excited, I'm gonna like hedge a little bit and just say that I'm encouraged by this. But I also know that I'm excited for us to get back into the anti-displacement discussion, because I think so much of what's possible route-wise is really going to depend on how much we're nailing the anti-displacement work. And if we're nailing it, if we're getting it right, and if people feel that way, then route options really start to open up. And if people don't have faith that that's happening, then people are going to say, I don't want this thing, right? And so really encouraged by this. I think it does move it away from, obviously it moves it off of Lyndale. I was interested in getting a little bit of clarity. I think it was one slide ago on the 17th exit. Can you explain what the issues are? Can you walk me through what you're identifying as an issue there? Just want to make sure I understand it.
Yeah, so what we've identified just up by the number 3 arrow, just north of, actually about where it says 94 badge, there is a very off-ramp, this is really a very, what we would call a stretched out interchange. It's stretched out over about a half a mile as opposed to being compressed if you really look at it. So 17th is one of the off-ramps off of 94, or the off-ramp to 17th. That's what gets you to Washington Avenue to West Broadway if you're going northbound on 94. So one of the issues with that interchange or intersection is it's very tight curve coming in, and the geometrics of it just really make it tough to get a train through there at grade and control the intersection well and maintain a safe intersection there.
So the problem is that's what makes you unable to build at grade with this option. Is that?
Well, it makes it very challenging to build at grade.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure I understood that. I just want to name, I do think that that building at grade is really important in terms of not, essentially creating a wall that further sort of, where the whole point of this project is about connectivity and about, making sure that people have transit options. I think the last thing we want to do is create a wall that then people, already feel like 94 is a barrier between North Minneapolis and the river. We don't need like another wall in addition to that for people to look across and feel like, wow, further, I'm further being separated from the river. So I just wanted to name that. Yep.
Thank you, great comments. Anything else before we move? Go ahead, Mayor.
So if we would go back to the slide we were on, I've mentioned this before, Minneapolis really should have the best say or the most important say in what goes through their community. But one of our design principles is minimize travel time. And although these routes, these alternatives may have de minimis amounts of time that they take to go through, I still would be interested in knowing what the travel time difference is between these routes eventually. Maybe not today, but I think it's important in that it's one of our design principles, and I want to know if I'm a rider, even if it's de minimis.
There. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, by the way. I do want to acknowledge that Brooklyn Park and Minneapolis have letters in the packet with that contain really, really good feedback. And so I'm hopeful that this gets, the topics are incorporated, and if necessary, that a topic is, more centered, particularly, anyway, I won't speak on behalf of cities, of course, but want to acknowledge that these letters exist and they appreciate the thoughtfulness that we're placing them.
Riva.
Chair, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Irene. I was going to say the same thing. It is very good to hear in detail what our cities in the southern part and the northern part of this Blue Line Extension project are thinking about in terms of how we want to provide community protections in terms of anti-displacement, but also wanting to hear about the support for a project such as this and what you would, I'm curious to know what all cities along the corridors feel about the benefits that they would receive from such a large project that is going to touch so many areas throughout the corridor. And we've seen that in the past, our corridor projects have had a tremendous amount of development along these corridors and benefits financially for businesses, for residents, for parks and trails. That's why we're all sitting here at the table to look at how we can benefit from this project. I know it's really easy to get down into the details and looking at some of the things that we do not want to have happen during this project, which are very important, but we also want to highlight what things we want to get positively from this corridor project.
Go ahead, thank you.
Thanks. Jillian Rosenquist, Golden Valley. And while we're no longer on the route, Councilmember Chambliss brought up a great point. I continue to come to these meetings because we know that there are populations that were studied in the earlier part of the project that still need connectivity, and that the way we can best support this line is thinking about the ways that we're connecting communities like Golden Valley, like Plymouth, to these lines. So I think one of the things that we should maybe take into consideration when we're looking at these route options is, for example, Commissioner Fernando and I have been working for a long time on bus rapid transit potentially being on Highway 55. So where would that fit into this big picture, right? Where would connections to important places in neighboring communities happen, right? Where would they be most efficient? Where would they be most safe? I think we have an opportunity to move out of the model where we're expecting everybody to come to one point downtown and connect there all the time. We would have an opportunity to connect on Plymouth. We would have an opportunity to connect on Broadway or things like that. So I just wanted to bring that up because I want us to think a little more globally about how this serves not just this particular community, but the entire kind of region, because this is a regional network.
Great, an important point to call out. Commissioner Lundy.
Just wanted to ask staff, we get letters. I think the Robbinsdale letter kind of slipped through the cracks and there was questions about was it received. And I just want to say that I assume that every time we get a letter, it is entered in the public record. Is that a correct assumption? Because that would always be my thing. I know Robbinsdale had asked, Crystal had asked, and just want to make sure that that is kind of our preferred method.
Yeah, great question, and we'll make sure that happens.
Yep. And the last thing I was going to mention, Councilmember Rosenquist, is my son rides transit to go to the U of M. Lives in Brook Park, stays at home. See if that's good or bad, but anyway. I have a feeling.
Got a 20-year-old.
Yeah, I have a feeling.
The CMC has no authority.
I'm pretty sure he is going to be sick of it, of us before we are him. But no, those transit things are important. He rides transit from U of M campus home. And so these things do have, the system is also a benefit, being connected to the airport, being connected to the U of M, to the Capitol, being Eden Prairie. It's not just connecting certain things, but there's connections all along this whole system that I think are the benefits of that.
Great, go ahead, Jima.
I don't like being a wet blanket, but I did want to, and I think the question's a really good one that Councilmember Chambliss is bringing up, but I do think it's important that we make a distinction between whether or not the region benefits and whether or not the people of the region benefit. I think that that's really where a lot of the anxiety comes from with the community, right? There is North Minneapolis has the highest ridership of anywhere in the region, right? People are on the 5, they're on the 14, they're on the 7, they're riding the bus, right? And so that's why this conversation's worth having. But if people are displaced by the very amenities that we're trying to provide, then they don't get to benefit from those amenities. And I think that that's, and so it's not that I don't want to talk about or that we don't want to talk about the benefits, right? The benefits of the route are I think, evident, but making sure that it's the people of the region that benefit versus just the abstract geography that benefits. I think that's the hard thing to execute, right? Building the train can be, engineers are gonna their ears are gonna hurt, but building the train can be easy, right? But making sure that that people don't get displaced, that's the hard part. I think that's the thing that a lot of communities like North Minneapolis, and I'll just, not only North Minneapolis, but that's the thing that people have seen trains be built. They haven't seen anti-displacement work be executed, in the full extent that they should be. And so I think that's the tension that I have sometimes when it comes to discussing the benefits of the route. It's not that I don't know that they're there, but more that, I want to be careful about how we move the conversation forward.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to the anti-displacement conversation. But first, you got the last comment here, and then we'll move on.
So, Hollis was the mayor of Brooklyn Park. I will say from a Brooklyn Park perspective, this is extremely important to us, both from the region, but the people perspective. So when we look at a lot of the northwest suburbs, they're underinvested in compared to maybe some of the southwest suburbs. We look at Brooklyn Park, our commercial values are $2 billion compared to, we're the 6th largest. 5th largest is Bloomington, they have $5 billion in commercial. So there's a $3 billion gap. Just up the street, we have Maple Grove, $4 billion, very different demographics. want to remind folks that Brooklyn Park is 55 to 62% people of color. So when we talk about these disparities and bringing opportunities for work, we're looking at this as a big opportunity, not just to bring jobs and development, but as we bring those jobs and development, we're saying, yes, there are some areas where we have affordable housing. How do we make sure that this new development is also bringing those opportunities for people who have not always had those opportunities? The other point is that often when we ask for east to west transportation, because we have certain pockets of Brooklyn Park, especially in the Huntington Place corridor off of Zane, where people are kind of landlocked. There's not a lot of ways for them to get around to get the jobs and access to what they need. And so this will allow us to have on some of those bus stops, on some of those train stops, it allows us to make a case for more east to west transportation, which will allow people to access more of those opportunities within Brooklyn Park. So if you look at northern Brooklyn Park, in many cases, we have a ton of businesses that are doing quite well. It's sometimes very difficult for people in southern Brooklyn Park to get those opportunities. So this will give us the east to west, but also the north to south ability to connect those various portions of Brooklyn Park so that it's not seen as two cities within one city, it's one city. So for us, I think, we're looking at it as saying this is an important part, and we're beginning to talk to developers about redeveloping along the Brooklyn Boulevard corridor and some of the opportunities that they're struggling with. We're saying we're betting on the BLRT to be a big part of helping you with this development, and the same goes for that northern portion. So for us, we're putting a big bet on this because this is very important to us, closing that gap. And I think folks who have been in politics much longer than I have understand that when we close that commercial gap, the taxes that come from that allow us to address many of those disparities, to bring that development, to invest in jobs programs, right? That's going to be a big driver for us to address those various disparities. And I think we hear people talk about disparities quite a bit. I want to remind people that Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, we have a ton of diversity within our cities as well. And so bringing those opportunities to those various cities are going to long-term address those disparities that people talk about.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And I promise we continue our conversation about anti-displacement, and we've already started. So I just want to open it up to continue and get reactions and thoughts. As has just been noted, we've had a couple of, at least 2 or 3 letters about the project, but also specifically about the recommendation report. I see Terrence Anderson's in the room, and some of our project staff, Kathy Gold from Hennepin, who've been really engaged in this advisory group. But it really is a chance for us as CMC members to kind of get reactions. And then we also have a resolution that was sent out in advance to consider advancing. So, okay, well then we can adjourn. No, we won't. Go ahead, Chuck.
I think now that we've got to the anti-displacement discussion, to say I do think it's important on the resolution to acknowledge, accept, and really implement. When I say implement, that doesn't mean every city has to do everything that's said in there. It really says the CMC is committed to the principles that was outlined and to continue that discussion. That's how I view it as. It's anti-displacement doesn't end with this acceptance. It continues. I think it's important to note the mile mark and then get to phase 2, which is equally as important. I think back, Mayor Blonigan, Councilmember Wagner, co-chaired Dorr, that, the first summer as commissioner during the heart of the COVID thing, we did about 24 driveway meetings. Some were spirited. Mr. Mayor's was very spirited. Where we brought neighbors together, and anti-displacement was talked about every time. People wanted to know, what are you going to do about displacement? What are you going to do about the businesses here? What are you going to do about people who are here? And this is Robbinsdale. And they had some very good questions, and so it was that time that we really started to talk about anti-displacement. And I think at that time, we were talking about the work that we were gonna start. And I think that work has been brought forth to us, that I think we should accept and recognize and also commit to as a group that this is important. And now that work now continues on, and I know that Crystal have questions, people in Brooklyn Park questions, and I know there's a lot of questions in Minneapolis. And so questions are a good thing. Objections are a good thing because it's really about trying to identify where things are and the opportunities. And some of these opportunities for investment go back decades. The principles behind anti-displacement didn't start today. It started a long time ago, where people were put in places where they didn't have home ownership, where they didn't own the buildings that they use for their business. And so we're gonna try to see what tools we can bring to try to keep those people there, and not just keep them there, but also get them connected to ownership, and so that they own the value of what's being put there, not a new lease with somebody else and hope that the rent doesn't go up. So I look at those principles as more than just that, but trying to tackle some of the stuff that, well, this project goes away. Some of those challenges are still gonna be there. And I also just wanna say publicly that we know that at the end of this, there's gonna require money. And I know there's a lot of interested parties at all levels, including the federal government, that are gonna talk about the investment money that needs to be bring to bear. And so I think we'll have those discussions when it's right, but make no doubt about it, a policy is a really cool thing, the document's really good, but it's gonna take some hard cold cash to make up for the fact that rents might go up. It might have to look at innovative ways. I know Crystal's looking, could they take some of their existing strip mall that has all small, mostly minority-owned businesses, make it part of a land bank, make it an opportunity for people to rent and lease there, or even condo it, where they actually buy just their place inside that at an affordable rate so they can stay there. So there's a lot of innovation I think that we can bring to bear. I will say that the FTA sees what we're doing. It's unique. And I think our question, which I've posed to both Congresswoman Omar and Congressman Phillips, is if they think it's unique, then I would expect them to provide some unique money to us. Because value is always about the dollars. If something's important, you find money. And so we call it out and make that request. So if they think it's really cool and we want to do this nationwide, then the first one should be done right. And we know that's going to take investment. And so I just want to say thank you to all the people who did all the real work on the anti-displacement, a lot of Saturdays, and that I take this as very important. And it is not done. We have phase 2 to start doing. We have lots of questions to answer. And we need to start talking about some hard, cold cash that needs to be brought to bear.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I think I would underscore that this is really almost a beginning. When you think about the implementation, it's also not set in stone, and it's a process, and it should be one that aligns with a lot of existing efforts, both at our local government, business, nonprofit, philanthropy, to align those interests together for results. Councilmember. Commissioner.
I do have a question. So is the anti-displacement working group complete, or how? But the thing that comes to mind as I read this, so for Hennepin, the project, the board received an update on the report, and it's now placed within Hennepin's disparity reduction kind of line of business. But I'm realizing that the working group might, like, do they want to hear how each jurisdiction is doing stuff? Are they meeting up? Is it like a roll through? Is it a presentation? We would love to engage in, to complete that, how the group finds meaningful, just to complete the purpose of the resolution. I'm realizing we work together, Kathy, so I maybe could have asked you separately, I'd love to hear a little bit on this.
Kathy, C-Terrence.
Well, Chair and committee members, it is our intent to keep the anti-displacement work group, the community members in place to continue the conversation. That's part of that transparency piece. As we continue down the road to say, are we really hitting the mark here? Are there some things that we should look at a little differently? And then engage within that and then also implement that, right? But having them at the table so they understand and they're along the journey as we proceed in a way where the community is benefiting. That is the focus. So yes, we would entertain that we would keep that going on as the project goes to completion and beyond.
I think she said it all.
She said it all. All right, Councilmember Allison.
Happy to defer to you.
Go ahead, just ask if the resolution's on the table.
Is the resolution on the table at the moment?
No, it is a draft resolution that has not been made, nor, it's just a piece of paper that we've all.
Okay, so nobody's moved it, okay. Couple of things I wanted to say. I do think that this project so far has, I think, made a commitment to exploring anti-displacement in a way that I find deeply encouraging, and that I'm glad that we've moved forward in this way. I do also want to say, though, that if kind of at this point, municipalities are sort of expected to proceed at their own discretion, right? If folks are left to their own devices to implement the recommendations that have been had, I think that starts to send a signal that we weren't ever really serious about anti-displacement. And so I think that to whatever degree that we can enshrine that and build that in, I think that that's going to be really, really important. I think there's some ideas around that as well. I also think that as we're moving forward, we're probably going to need more than a volunteer group who's done a tremendous job. We're going to need more than a volunteer group to sort of track this and watchdog this and help us implement this. And so, I don't want to sort of spitball an idea, a structure right here from my seat, but I do think that there needs to be an implementation team, a group of professionals who can help guide each municipality through what this looks like, who can be a resource to businesses and people who are going to be, who are looking for solutions, want to know what the policies are, want to know what their individual recourse is. I also think that it's really important that that whether it's that group or this one, that cities and individuals not be left to sort of find funding for things, right? Like if there's federal money, if there's state money, certainly the city, the city of Minneapolis. The mayor's the actual spokesperson, but I'm speaking right now. But I think we're committed to figuring out where can we improve, where can we make investments, but I don't think any city here on their own can completely foot the bill, even if they wanted to, on what this would take. And so I just want to really nail down that this is going to have to be a collaboration, monetarily, policy-wise, all across the board. And I think that if we start to really sink our teeth into that, I think we start to show folks we're serious about this. We're not leaving, we didn't come up with the Cadillac version of recommendations and then leave them to build it, right? But that we came up with this and we're helping folks get from point A all the way to point Z on this policy. I'll leave my comments there and maybe speak if other things come up, but just wanted to leave that for the group.
Appreciate the comments. Mayor, you can fill it in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Councilmember Ellison's point, is it the intent of the chair or the body to bring this resolution today? And if so, I have a couple of points where I think Councilmember Ellison's points can be further addressed and we can improve the strength of the resolution itself.
I think that is our hope, is to pass a resolution, and actually along the spirit of what Councilmember Ellison has said, a resolution not to be the definitive path, but to show commitment that this is beyond any one entity to take responsibility. But, and you may have some thoughts, although, why don't you go ahead?
If I may then,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'll just move the resolution with an amendment to it.
Okay, or
that is
maybe a
appropriate.
resolution modified with your comments.
A modified resolution, even better. And so I can let others, speak to the importance of the whereas clauses. I think Councilmember Ellison articulated very well, and that we've seen trains get built before, and we need to make sure that the anti-displacement work and the commitments happen ahead of time so that people aren't left high and dry. And to that end, the importance of coordination, I think, is paramount. The resolution itself presently reads on the be it further resolved that it encourages membership to coordinate. So it encourages all of us to coordinate, which I think is a noble goal, but coordination is easier said than done, especially when you're talking about money. And so if we could have that the project sponsors themselves be the entity that's bringing us together, and we have a vote that supports the work, that supports the advocacy to both state and federal governments to get the necessary funds to do that anti-displacement work, I think the strength of it would be drastically improved. And so the amendment that I have is, or I should say, the modification to the resolution that you have in front of you, and if Suzanne could pass it out, I'll just read it. It will read as, rather than encouraging its membership to coordinate, be it further resolved that the Blue Line Extension CMC will work in partnership with the project sponsors. And then it would be the project sponsors that would coordinate, explore, and develop a proposed framework and public engagement plan with community members, nonprofits, philanthropic, private sector, et cetera, partners, to get to the recommended outcomes, including securing funds needed for implementation for anti-displacement measures before, during, and after the construction of the Blue Line extension. So it includes all three phases, and we all remain on the same team to try to get this work done, and it's just a stronger resolution.
Thank you. Got it. And I think if Suzanne's passing it out, I
I'll
won't.
second it to not, leave it hanging.
Thank you.
Could I ask a quick
Motion is
question?
made and seconded and discussion. Ricardo.
Thank you. So no, absolutely. I think that when we were looking at things, we saw the importance on not just accepting a report. Blue Line Coalition is in the business of anti-displacement. I would say not in the business of accepting reports. So for us, the calling to action is extremely important. And I'm just curious, in the spirit and energy of taking action and building trust and having strong commitments, would it make sense at all, when we were in the anti-displacement working group, the idea of internal working groups became clear. City staff in each of the impacted municipalities were designated to participate in the working group and to also be a connecting point in those cities. So how can we get the internal working groups of each of the municipalities activated so they receive the report, they read the report, and they maybe present it to their city council's meetings. So then city council members start knowing about what's happening, because our concern is that when municipal consent comes around, some of the peers that you might have in city of Minneapolis or in other cities might not be aware of what's going on. And we, in a way, will be starting from zero with them. So the idea here is like, how can we ensure that the commitment we make today doesn't just commit to the idea, but that we're committed to an action to get city councils' agendas populated with anti-displacement before the end of the year? Or I don't know what kind of timeline we can work with, but is that already implied in the resolution today? Or how are we gonna activate city staff to get working on the recommendations or the report? That's my question, I guess.
I'd open us up to the group. Council members.
I mean, I'm certainly happy and committed to, especially as we've moved further into this work, to the Minneapolis City Council's familiar with Kira's work and working with Kira, and so I think that, I guess even if it's not sort of written in stone somewhere in this document, I'm committed to having Kira come before the appropriate committee of the City Council and beginning that discussion. And I, encourage other cities too. And if folks need help making connections, I mean, C. Terrence is right here, so I doubt that we need that. But if folks need help building connections and making that relationship, I'm happy to also support other cities in that.
All right, great, thanks. We have Mayor Blonigan and then Mayor Winston.
That was a good, valuable comment. I would be stunned knowing these various city councils if any of them weren't enthusiastically trying to support anti-displacement efforts. So I think you can have that. With regard to the actual motion that was made, changing things, you might need to have a possessory apostrophe on sectors now. So look at that.
The punctuation somewhere.
Oh.
I don't know.
So
Sorry about that.
All right, Mayor.
So I didn't catch the full question. So maybe if the question could be restated.
I think it's reaction to Ricardo's comment
Was it a
that,
statement, or I just wanted to see what the question was and what Ricardo was saying. So.
My main question was like, how can we go further today and ask the internal working groups from each of the municipalities that participated actively in the anti-displacement working group to read and receive the report and put it on the city council's agendas before the end of the year, so the city council members from each of the municipalities can become aware of what's happening. So that was kind of like, like a bigger commitment to just move it further down, so.
So I guess my response was, you have a commitment from Brooklyn Park to move it forward. I would give various city councils the flexibility to address that portion in the way they see is going to be most effective, given the wishes of those who elected them, right? So, we're at the table, there's a commitment there, but in terms of some of these inner workings, I think the flexibility to make it happen is the most important piece.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? I will say that I think this is a really strong statement, and the idea of working in partnership really says, at the point of Ricardo, to actually make progress. And because the CMC is an advisory board that makes recommendations to the project sponsors, it's really kind of incumbent on individual, municipal efforts to kind of align along these lines. Did I see somebody else's hand up? Nick, no? Well, we have a motion that is a modification on what was sent out, so it includes everything except for that one paragraph that's been modified.
Mr. Chair, just to raise what Mayor Blonigan was saying. Mayor, were you saying private sector needs to be singular, or were you saying possessive?
Well, it's.
So sorry, I mean,
possessive.
it's a
It
thing.
says, yeah, it
It's a
says
thing.
with community members, public, nonprofit, philanthropic, and private sectors partners. That could be plural or possessive, so I don't know what the drafter
I
meant.
understand now. Why don't we just get rid of the S?
I think getting rid of the S, because
The
then,
singular
I was trying to say,
would be-
all of the private sectors are accountable.
I think if that would be a friendly, that'd be
I think
nice.
it's a friendly-
To just make that sorry, I'm like.
typographical correction.
I'm like
Just get rid of the S.
backseat
Oh,
cheering
yeah,
over
that's
here.
what
We shouldn't be.
No, thank you, Irene.
And then, I would, if it's possible to strike, so including securing funds, not the funds.
Yeah.
Just to make it like securing funds, and that would allow for locals to contribute funds also, or engage in the funding process in a different way.
Agreed.
Striking the, and that's a friendly correction, is okay with the city of Minneapolis that made the
And
Motion corrections, yes.
The second and the mover agree.
exactly, that's the benefit of the second and the mover, yeah.
Just like the movies? No. All right. My Robert's rules is dog-eared, but somewhere else. All right.
Is there any way that we can add a time component to this for us to know when any of these would happen with that spirit of building trust and that commitment at all? Do we have any idea when will partners be, you know what I'm saying, like anything? Because for me, walking it back to people, like, this is excellent, right? But if we have any sort of idea on the timeline of this, that will be extremely helpful. So for example, in the funding bill on the legislation, it calls some certain timelines in there, I believe. So I don't know if we can attach to those timelines or something like that, something innovative or creative that we can do to put a time frame to this resolution at all.
Commissioner Lundy, you had a.
Just wanted to say that I think as many people know, we've been socializing a funding collaborative based off of the Central Corridor Funding Collaborative Model, which was something launched by St. Paul, which brought funding together. You need municipal consent. And so you're asking for a timeline. What we were told quite clearly by the St. Paul people is that no funder is going to contribute money to an anti-displacement until after they know
it's real.
It's real. And that won't be really expressed until we get to that. So we can definitely plan, you can get things ready, you can get the framework, but those checks and the FTA, the feds, the state, no one is going to write the first check until after. So I was gonna say to Ricardo, as I get where you're going, I've been informed quite clearly that is a moment in time where people will start to say, okay, it's real. We've gone through all the motions, everybody's agreed, we've got permission, and then we go to the FTA, and that's where you'll see those foundational things. So from a standpoint of that part, I can predict that's next spring at the earliest.
And I would say, in terms of accountability, regular reports coming to this group, which is very public, hold a certain level of accountability on schedule, without being a certain date.
Great, thank you.
All right, we have a motion as modified and corrected.
It's a team effort.
It's a team effort. It takes the whole village. Any more comments, thoughts on this? Because I think it would be great to pass this. Sure.
All right, could we have a roll call?
Sure. Roll call vote. So with that, Nakongo, are you going to call the roll? Yep. All right, with no more discussion, Nakongo, please call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Zelling.
No, I'm always last, but the answer is yes.
I like that. I had to do that
Councilmember
as a mayor.
Chambers.
Aye.
Commissioner Landy.
Aye.
Commissioner Fernando.
Aye.
Mayor Frey.
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenquist.
Aye.
Mayor Blonigan.
Aye.
Councilmember Kaiser.
Aye.
Mayor Winston.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
Aye.
Ricardo Perez.
Aye.
Carla Arredondo Payan.
Aye.
Sarah Gonder for Mike Barnes.
Aye.
Dan Dwyer.
Aye.
And that concludes it. Mr. Chair, we have 14. Yes.
This motion has passed unanimously, and I thank you all for this, both the conversation, the debate, and the wordsmithing. And I think this really is a strong statement, but every meeting is a referendum on its success. So our work continues, and I really appreciate the commitment that we've heard here today. We're on to next steps. I would also just welcome any comments that anybody has on anti-displacement, not relating just to the resolution, although I think we've said them all. If there is, let me get to my notes here. Yes, our schedule. Thursday, July 13th is the next CMC meeting. So we're going to continue the conversation about Minneapolis alignment. And we'll fleshing out some of the options you really heard and we discussed today. With that, does anybody else have any further comments, or would you like 8 minutes left to your day? Dr. Watson.
The letters that are coming in from the different organizations and cities, I'm just wondering what's happening with those. I understand that they're being recorded and, they're added into the agendas, but are these concerns being pulled out and sent to the places, spaces, and departments where these issues can be addressed?
Yeah,
Chris, you gonna say it?
Mr. Chair and Dr. Watson, so we actually have our issue resolution teams with each of the cities. So sometimes the letters come up there and we're kind of tracking the issues and referring to items in the letter. If it's a specific entity that sends a letter, the WBC, for example, we are reaching out to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss the letter. So we do track each of those letters that are coming in. When we come back to the CMC and kind of go through end to end, kind of remind everybody what we've talked about in 2023, we'll make sure to look at those letters again to make sure there's nothing else that's left open that we need to address. So we are definitely tracking those.
Thank you.
Right. With that, enjoy a beautiful afternoon. We'll look forward to seeing you in July 13th. We'll be here before you know it. Thanks, everyone. This meeting's